So the Red Cross's mission is to prevent and alleviate human suffering through mobilizing the efforts of volunteers and the generosity of our donors. Well, there's actually 3 things. It's be informed, make a plan, and build a kit. If you want to store a kit that's someplace easy to get to, easily accessible, ideally by your front door, your emergency exit route.
When it comes to disaster preparedness, whether it's for an earthquake, fire, floods, anything of that nature, the important message to take away is that you need to be prepared in advance. You need to think about what you're going to do with your animals if you are required to evacuate, or if you can't get back to your animals in the event of an incident that occurs while you're away from home. You should have a plan in place. There's information available online. You can go to the WashingtonCountyPets.com website to get information about emergency preparedness for pets, and we would encourage you to do that. But the main message is be prepared in advance. Think about what you're going to do with your animals in the event of an emergency.
For many people, protecting pets and livestock will be an important component of being ready. Because as the title of Joe's talk suggests, animals are in jeopardy too. Joe describes herself as a dedicated pet mom and surrogate livestock handler. Since graduating in 2005 from the Washington County Community Emergency Response Team program, more easily referred to as CERT, she has trained with technical animal rescue teams in the Northwest and deployed nationally on 2 emergency animal sheltering operations. At the conclusion of her presentation, Joe will be in a booth in the market to take your questions and talk with you further. So please take advantage of that opportunity. Please join me in welcoming Joe Becker as she talks about animals in jeopardy.
Thank you, Pat. Good morning. Thank you for coming. A couple things before I get started. The Quake Up folks were kind enough to provide several handouts to you. I'm not going to be speaking to most of them, but they're good resource materials. Over there is a sheet that looks like this in a variety of colors. That is copies of some of the slides we'll be looking at today. And then if you want more information from me, if you want email tips on animals and preparing animals for disaster, this little sheet is over there also. And then this card gives you the web address that I'm going to be referring to throughout the presentation. So let me ask a question. Just show of hands. How many of you would describe yourselves as fair to moderately prepared? You've been doing some preparedness work, okay? And how many of you this is new to you? Excellent, welcome to everyone. My personal passion is animals and disaster. I've been working in this field in my free time for 10 or 12 years now. And again, my personal passion is animals, both great and small. And one of my messages to folks is to help you survive and thrive in a kind of disaster with your animals. Honestly, for me, helping people prepare for their animals, thinking about their animals' needs and how to take care of them in a disaster is a twofer. People are statistically more likely to help someone else more so than themselves. And if we can get folks thinking about their animals, if we can tug on those heartstrings and think about, Fluffy or Fido needs water and food and any medications that the animal needs, it will probably dawn on them at some point, I don't want to have to drink Fido's water in an emergency. I need some too. So it's a kind of a two-handed approach. So for me, it's all about the animals, but it really does have an impact on getting people to prepare as well. So welcome and intros, and if we have an emergency, we've got 2 exits right out the front here. Head out and congregate outside. My aim this morning, and when I give talks, is to introduce the topic of emergency preparedness in general and animal preparedness more specifically to my audiences. Today I'm going to share a variety of resources with you. We don't have very long together, so I'm just going to be letting you know where you can get more information, do your own work at home. And then to inspire you to take one step. For some of you, this event today is the first time you've thought about preparing for an emergency or disaster of some sort, and it can be overwhelming. I've been doing this for over a decade, and I'm still not done. It's still overwhelming. But just take one step. Find one thing that resonates with you. You can go home tonight and do it, and then think about one thing the next week, and just keep taking step. For those of you that have been doing this for a while, and you feel like you're pretty prepared, my goal is to suggest one more thing that you can do that you hadn't thought of. Okay, so there's a lot out there that you can do. One more step is my goal for the day. Most of the resources I'm going to share with you this morning are available for free on my website. I don't charge for anything on my website, and there's one resource that's posted elsewhere online. So again, if you want to get this handout or jot down that web address, you can take a look at the materials that I'll be sharing with you there. As a first starter, I suggest people take a look at this video by the Chemical Stockpile group. They've done a video for pet owners. I want to say 35, 45 minutes. And when I'm doing talks on animals and disaster, I can go for 3 or 4 hours. It does a pretty good job in under an hour of talking about a whole bunch of things you ought to think about as an animal owner, animal parent. So that's a really good place to start. And that video is available for free download on my website. I also suggest that you look at having a lost flyer for any animals that you have in your life. And make that flyer now before the animal's missing, before it runs away from home or before a disaster hits and the fence falls down and it gets loose, etc. This flyer template is from Animal Aid in Portland. And you'll notice that there's pictures of the animals from different angles. Make sure to get pictures of any identifying marks to help you if the animal gets lost and you're trying to claim it. It's like, this is a picture of my animal and it has, a birthmark or a whatever here. The picture helps you prove that. Also be sure to get pictures of the animal with you and members of your household. Again, if you're separated in a disaster and you're trying to claim the animal from, say, an emergency shelter, being that this picture can help you prove this is my animal. I'm not just shopping for a free pet, right? Which we've seen in disaster settings. I also suggest that you take a look at a will, a power of attorney, and letters of authorization. So again, Animal Aid in Portland suggests both a document that you can carry in your car that says, in the event of a crash and you're incapacitated, there's pets at home that need some attention. Okay, I see some pros and cons to that, but it's not a bad idea. It's something to think about. They and I also suggest a power of attorney or mentioning your pets in your will, because if you don't do that, who gets to decide what happens to your animals? The government, right? And I want a little more control over that, right? No disrespect to the government, but I have a personal opinion of where my animals should go. And then I personally have drafted a letter that I have near the entrances in my home that which my neighbors, a few choice neighbors are aware of, if I'm not home, something happens to the home, there's, a tree comes down and the house is compromised and my animals can get out, or a neighbor's over and notices one of the animals is sick or passed out or something. There's a letter at each door where I keep carriers saying, it says, "Dear veterinarian, if someone shows up with a picture, with this animal, pictures of the animal, and this letter, please care for the animal. I will be responsible for the bill. Here's all the ways that you can reach me. Here's all my family's information. Here's my primary vet's contact information. And any of us can make determining decisions. But do anything you can, and whoever brings this animal in, please take care of it." Now, that letter doesn't guarantee that whatever vet receives the animal is actually going to take that letter on faith. But I'm giving my neighbors, my designated neighbors, and anyone else who comes along, as much power to help me help my animals as possible. Templates for all of these are available free on the joebecker.weebly.com page. So if those are anything that sounds interesting to you, want to take a look at and customize for yourself, I encourage you to do so. Additional documents, and a lot of these are available over here as printouts. Understanding animal behavior, body language, how to communicate with animals in their language, so to speak. A variety of resources that I encourage you to take a look at, both printed out and on the Weebly site. The website that I have posts upcoming and past presentations, and on the past presentations page, you can take a look at some videos of presentations I've done, 3-hour presentations. You also can download copies of handouts from those presentations, so take a look at those, again, all free. I also have a sign up for periodic email tips, so you can either do that with a little half sheet paper that I showed you earlier, or you can sign up on the website for that for free. Okay, how many of you have taken the Community Emergency Response Team, the CERT program? Okay, very good. The CERT program is a federal FEMA program that's it's administered and funded locally. It helps citizens become aware of the potential dangers in their community and how to respond to them safely, and take care of themselves, take care of their household, and if they choose, go out into the neighborhood and help take care of the community. FEMA has a CERT animal response module. The PowerPoint is available for free download from the FEMA website at the bottom of the screen. They actually have two. The first one, it talks about preparedness tips for animals and behavior awareness, that communication, body language, etc. The second course talks about how to deal with animals that you might encounter when you're out doing CERT work in the community. So imagine a disaster has occurred, you're okay, your household's okay, you choose to go out into the neighborhood and check on your neighbors. And again, let's say that in that giant windstorm or that earthquake, a fence is down and you're approaching a home to knock on the door, see how your neighbor is, and that friendly pooch that you've known, down the street for a while, is all of a sudden acting rather erratic. It's barking, it's lunging, there's no longer a fence to keep it, secure away from you. And you're really determined to get in and knock on the door to the neighbor and see if your neighbor's okay. What should you do in those scenarios? What should you be aware of? That's the sort of thing that this module talks about. Neither of these they're not necessarily courses, they're PowerPoint files that you can download. Neither of them speaks to going out and rescuing animals in the community during a disaster. They're really helping you be safe, either prepare your own pets ahead of time or be safe in responding to animals in the community when there is a disaster. Okay, so interesting stuff, good information. Suggest you take a look at it if you have a chance. Some of the fundamentals of the CERT program are to size up the situation. Take a look around and be aware of your immediate hazards. That fence down and a lunging dog is an immediate hazard, so size that up and back up, okay? Safety first. The CERT program tells us that if you get hurt, you can't help anyone else. And that's definitely true when we're dealing with animals, particularly animals in a stressful incident. They may not act the way they normally do. Even your own pets, that you know them, they know you, they trust you, but in an incident, they're all upset and their environment's disrupted and they can act very erratically too. So your safety first. And then also triage. CERT talks about doing the greatest good for the greatest number. Again, if you get hurt trying to reach that one neighbor whose door is behind that angry dog, you can't help 5 neighbors down the road. Okay, so again, if a big disaster happens and you're out in the community, keep the principles of size up, your situational awareness, safety first, and triaging in mind. So why listen to me? Very briefly, I grew up in the Portland metro area, and I've had 15 households in my lifetime. So you can do the math, I've had a lot of them. I also have responsibility for neighbors' livestock when they're out of town. Like some of you, I have done a lot of end-of-life care for my pets. In fact, when I moved from Washington County to Clackamas County 10 years ago, I lost 5 pets in 14 months. I'd had all of them, all of their lives, and half of my lifetime, and most of them simply got old together. My daily routine at that point involved no less than an hour to do 5 different diets, 20-some meds, including sub-Q fluids and injections. My commitment level to my animals is beyond what a lot of people do. That's just who I am and the choice that I make. And on top of, I guess it kind of started over a decade ago when I had several indoor-only cats, a couple dogs, and a rabbit. And it occurred to me out of the blue that if there was, say, a house fire, which is terribly common, statistically there's one every less than 2 minutes in the US. If there was a house fire, I literally couldn't get out the door with all my animals. The best I could do, I lived on a ground floor unit, the best I could do was open the doors and windows and hope they made it out and hope we were reunited later. But even if I had carriers and containers for all of them, I couldn't carry them all, right? And that bothered me. I didn't have a plan, but it bothered me. When I moved to Beaverton, I learned about the Beaverton CERT program and took it. That began a course of over 125 classes that I've taken in the last 10 or 12 years. Some of them were free online FEMA courses. Some of them were week-long intensive incident command system position-specific courses. I just went back to the Emergency Management Institute in Maryland and took a week-long course there. I've done animal law conferences. I've attended search and rescue conferences. I've helped participate in and plan full-scale exercises, both for people and for animals. I've also trained with 2 technical animal rescue teams, one in Oregon, one in Washington State. When I talk about animals and disasters, great and small, you might have a cat, you might have a horse, but it's not just your animals. What animals might you come into contact with most unexpectedly in some sort of an unexpected situation like a disaster? You might notice that I didn't mention any particular program that I'm affiliated with. I have a lot of different affiliations. I'm here today as Joe Becker, just sharing the information that I've gathered over a decade with you, and I hope that you'll come visit with me at the booth afterward. We have a chance to share. The rest of the time today, I wanted to give you what I call the Animals-In-Jeopardy game. Now, if you're a linear thinker, this may bother you. This is not a list of everything you should do. This is not, a comprehensive, do this, don't do that, to prepare your animals. Some of that's offered over here in the handouts and on the Weebly website. But in less than an hour, what I wanted to do was pepper you with some different thoughts and suggestions just to get you thinking.
All right.
Alrighty, so raise your hand if you've got the answer and I'll try to see who's first. You live on a farm. Having steel-toed boots is a good idea in order to protect your feet. True or false? What do you think?
Who knows the
somebody
answer?
raise their hand. I can't
Raise your
get
hand.
everybody. In the back.
Oh, boy, giving me some...
You're going to make Pat run.
All right, I think you were first.
True. Are you sure about that? Yeah? Yeah, I think so. The answer is it depends. So, Pat, you know what? I am going to give you some of these because I would not try to throw all the way to the back of the room.
All right.
So the answer is it depends. Steel-toed boots have their place, and if you have them, I'm not saying not to wear them. But if you're around livestock and they step on your foot in this shoe, what's going to happen to my toes? It might crush it. It might hurt awfully bad. If I have steel-toed boots on, what's that going to do? It could amputate the toe. I'm just saying. Okay, so think about, it's part of your size up. Think about the environment. If an incident happens, you probably don't want to be out there with particularly an unfamiliar, livestock animal. Certainly, even in the best of times, you want to keep your distance, be aware of their body movement and where your body is in relation to them. But one more thing to think about. What shoes are you wearing? Okay? Emergencies are always sudden and immediate. True or false? Raise your hand. Yes, ma'am.
False.
You think so? Okay. Woo. Thank you. False. Some warnings may be issued hours or even days in advance. So some disasters are unexpected. And when I talk about disasters, it could be that house fire, it might be your pet seizuring, it might be a heart attack, it could be the big earthquake, it could be anything in the middle, right? Some disasters give you warning. Sometimes there's buildup to seizures and you can get familiar with those symptoms and know that something's coming with your animal. For environmental dangers, flooding, unless it's a flash flood, we usually have notice. Sometimes fires, you might have a warning days in advance that something's coming. My suggestion to you is not only get your preparedness kits together so you can either shelter in place or evacuate as need be, but also to prioritize your supplies. Near my front door, I have my go kits, and I have a number on each one of them. So I know in my head that if I have no time at all, statistically, a lot of disasters happen in the middle of the night in bad weather. I mean, that's just the way it is. If it happens in the middle of the night and I have no time, I'm going out the window. And I'm leaving the window open or trying to get the animals out with me. If I have enough time, I'm going to go out the front door where I can grab my purse and my keys and take the car, right? If I have enough time, I'm going to be grabbing the cats as I go with me. And I keep a carrier in my trunk so that if I can just grab my pets and toss them in the car with me, when I get somewhere safe, I can put them in a contained area where they're safer. If I know that I have more time, I can grab bag number 1 from the closet. And that bag has some food and water for them and for me. It has maps, it has lists of campgrounds and hotels that take animals and a variety, emergency contact information, the lost pet flyer. It has some of those vital things I know I want. If I have time, I'm going to come back and I don't have to think about it. Bag 2 and 3 go over each shoulder and I know which ones I'm going to take next. If I know I have more time, I'm going to empty everything out of my trunk, grab a couple coolers from the shed, empty my fridge and my freezer into my coolers, and now I have more food for me and the animals for a few days. If I have more time, there's a list in my closet by the front door. I'm going to go in, I've got my files backed up in go bag number 1, but it'd be really nice to have the laptop or maybe my computer tower, my family china. There's a few things I know I'd like to have if I had time to prepare and grab those. Random tips for 1. This is a conservative group. We're starting with the ones. I'm told that Clackamas County, where I live, has the largest horse population per capita west of the Mississippi. What's the leading disaster horse owners face? Raise your hand. What do you think? Give it a guess. Pat might know this one. Yes, in the back.
Oh,
The answer was fire, and yes, and Pat, I'm going to give you a candy for her. She's
okay.
Way over in the corner. A barn fire is actually statistically the most common hazard for horse owners. Now, you might not all have horses. You may or may not live near a horse in a horse barn. But take a look at some of the prevention tips here. Some of them are common sense. Some of them you might not think about if you're not familiar with barn environment. Would you throw out another question for us? True or false? 30% of those that did not evacuate from Hurricane Katrina stayed at least in part because they did not want to leave their pets behind. True or false? Are you sure? Are you sure? It's actually wrong, and the only reason it's wrong is it was a higher percentage. Over 40% of the people that didn't evacuate from Hurricane Katrina said they didn't in part because they're animals. This picture is from Hurricane Katrina. I have no idea what situation put these people up to their necks in fast flowing water with their animals. But it was not a good situation. Hurricane Katrina actually changed our emergency management industry forever. The conventional wisdom at that time had been, if you need to evacuate, get out, take care of yourself, leave your animals 3 days food and water, and they'll be just fine. We know that Katrina went on for quite some time beyond that, and the animals weren't fine. In fact, after several days and weeks, animal owners that did evacuate and left their animals behind, they followed the official advice, knew that the waters were still rising, and the dogs that were chained in the yard, the animals that were locked inside the house, literally were drowning as the waters were still rising. That was after they'd already run out of food and water. Okay, animal owners that were desperate to get to their animals breached the safety, the perimeter of the incident, and went into the hot zone and were trying to get their animals. They put their own lives at risk, and they put our first responders' lives at risk. They were trying to keep them safe. us crazy animal owners, I mean, it would, I probably would have been one of them. All the more reason to A, be prepared. And the conventional wisdom now, if you ask any emergency manager, if it's not safe for you, it's not safe for your animals. All the more reason we need to be prepared ahead. How do we get them how do we transport them? How do we take them with us? Where do we go with them? Somebody throw out another question for us, please. Thank you. What to pack for 2? It might sound vain and impractical, but there are good reasons to pack pantyhose in your emergency supplies. Can you list at least one related to animals? Yes, ma'am. Ah, okay, very good. Use it for a leash. You can also use the pantyhose for a muzzle. There's a way to do a quick muzzle on animals using a fabric similar to an ace bandage or pantyhose works just fine. You can use it as a bandage. Put some absorbent material over a wound and then wrap it with the pantyhose and tie a little knot. So we've got to be really good at improvising with what we find around us when a disaster hits. There's some kind of unconventional things you might not think about that you might actually want to pack in your supplies. They're cheap, they're easy to find, etc. And while we're talking about the unexpected and inappropriate use of female products, how might you use sanitary napkins and tampons in an emergency? Stop bleeding, right? So a sanitary napkin can be that absorbent material that you wrap over a wound. Tampons are really good for broken and bloody noses. It's gross, I'm just saying, okay? Think about what materials you have on hand or might choose to pack. You pick another.
Oh.
Yeah.
Let's pack for 3.
All right, 3 points. Didn't start, there we go. A coworker donates leftover cat food to you when her kitty passes away. You use it to stock up your pet's emergency supplies. You're super kitty mom. True or false? False?
I realized your answer was for 2.
Maybe. So some things to think about. Great to have a windfall of unexpected supplies, but is it food that your animal's used to? Just like you in an emergency, your pet, your animal's likely to be upset. Their digestive system can be upset, and introducing rich food or food they're not used to can exacerbate that situation. How are you going to get it open? Do you have a can opener, or is it a self-opening can? How are you going to store leftovers? Okay, at least pack some Ziploc baggies. You might not have refrigeration, but if you only, my cats only eat a partial can every 2-3 days. I sure don't want to have to throw the rest of that away because we might not come across it anymore, right? So how are you going to store it? What's the expiration date of the food your friend gave you? And are you rotating those supplies just like you would rotate food for yourself in your emergency supplies? Would you give us another question, please?
Random tips for 3.
Random tips for 3. In a regional disaster where mass evacuation is required, responders will rescue and evacuate animals as well as people. What do you think? True or false? I saw a hand over here. What do you think? True? It depends. 6 points for the lady.
All right.
Yes is true. No is true. Under the federal Pet Evacuation and Transportation Standards Act, rescue of pets is secondary to rescue of people, but it's authorized. By authorized, it means the federal government may pay back the local responders for their expenses out of pocket, as long as it doesn't jeopardize the primary mission of human health and safety, keeping property safe, etc. So the answer is maybe. Depends on the situation. And honestly, while a lot of our professional responders, their hearts are there with us, with our animals, this can sometimes dictate their behavior, what they can or can't or are or aren't willing to do. Okay. Will you pick another question for us? Give 3 reasons you should bring outside animals in during a disaster. So who wants to give a try at giving at least 3? Oh, all right, go for it. They could run away. And what else?
Trees could fall on top of them.
Tree could fall on top of them, yes. And what else? One more.
People might not notice them, or
Yep.
they could hurt people?
Absolutely. Those are all really good thoughts. 6 more points. I got to tell you, the young lady over here is in the lead. All right, so we've got some competition. So here's some things that I came up with. Environmental hazards. She said a tree could fall on them. Absolutely. Think about the winter storms we can have around here, flying objects, etc. Down power lines. Displaced wildlife that might not have been a threat necessarily before in normal times, their environment, their food sources has been disrupted, they're stressed out. That might be a greater threat in a disaster than it was the day before. Animals have instincts about impending severe weather incidents often, and they might hide if frightened before it ever happens. So it might be hard for you to find them when you realize something's happened or about to happen and you want to evacuate. So good idea to bring them in, have them close at hand. If you have to evacuate, they'll be close at hand. If you're like me, if you're an animal person, having your animals near you can calm you. It can also help calm them. Okay, and that's a double benefit for everybody. Should you always bring your animals inside in a disaster? Always? No, there aren't many extremes that I would agree on, right? Think particularly about outdoor animals. Think about horses. If there's a disaster coming, should you necessarily lock them in the barn? Should you maybe? Depends on the situation, right? If it's a rolling wildfire, no. If it's a storm, they might be safest in there. So it does depend, okay? And I'm happy to take questions back at the booth. Will you pick another question for us, please? What to pack for one? All right. You should have appropriate carriers, trailers, and crates for your animals. So transportation is an important factor if you're going to evacuate. Are these appropriate for the animals in the picture? Frankly, all of these might work in a pinch. And I particularly like the Doberman Pinscher and the little dog. I've heard a vet tech at Dove Lewis talk about how often it seems that large, like Great Danes, will come to the clinic in VW bugs. And they're like, seriously, if you've got a big dog, get a big car. Ideally one with a hatchback in the back, so we can just kind of take them out. Think about... Yes, but if the animal's like contorted and in pain, you just want to slide them out. So think about the animals you have and what transportation you need for them to be safe and comfortable, for you to be safe during transport. Now, there's times, my neighbor has, when I moved there, they had 30-some animals. Most of their animals are old too, so our whole end of the road we called the geriatric ward. They now have about 15 animals. They've lost several too. How do you have enough trailers, horse trailers, for that much livestock? In an emergency, the best thing you might be able to do, just like me is to cut them loose. Just like me and my indoor-only animals, in an immediate emergency, the best I might be able to do is open doors and windows. I hope they get out and then we get reunited. Livestock, in the moment, the best thing you might be able to do is cut them loose. Hopefully you have some identification on them permanently, something, or spray paint your number on their hide, so maybe you're reunited. Realize that if your dogs, your goats, your bulls are out running around, potentially you're liable for whatever happens. They might cause a traffic accidents, they might bother someone else's animals, and you might or might not ever be reunited. So again, this all goes back to thinking ahead, preparing ahead. I don't ever want to scare anyone, but even if you don't have the money to buy supplies, even if you don't have the space to store them, if you just think about the what ifs, you're more likely to survive an incident and go on to thrive. And my goal is for you to do that with your animals. Okay?
Joe, did you want to ask a question? Name 2 things in your bedroom.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I forgot where I was. Thank you, Pat, for keeping me on track. Name 2 things in your bedroom that you could use to gather up and transport your animals if you had to. I see hands over here. Yeah. Give Mom a chance. One queen.
Well, I can think of a sheet or a blanket to put them on, and a dresser drawer.
Excellent. Yes. So dresser drawer or sheet, pillowcases. Another option, pillowcases, there's some pros and cons. We actually in the rescue field will use pillowcases to gather up on occasion. We tend to set aside the old tattered ones we don't necessarily want to have in the bedroom, and they can be a little threadbare, and literally cats, even dogs, the claws can go right through and then they're no longer contained. There's some pros and cons to sheets and pillowcases and the such, but if it's in the moment and you've got nothing else, do what you need to do, right? It's an idea. Laundry hampers, laundry baskets. I've been doing this class for several months now, and somebody said shoebox. I'm like, and they said, oh, I have a hamster. I'm like, oh, okay, pocket pet, yes, good, size appropriate, that makes sense. I was a little worried for a moment. So get familiar with what you have around that you could use. Now, my own preparedness, when I moved to Oregon City, I wanted to be sure I could evacuate with my animals if I needed to. And I encourage you to do this each month as you test your smoke alarm, test evacuating. And do it with everyone in your household, the people, the little people, the older people, and your animals. And there aren't always good answers. You might not always get out the door with everybody. It happens. But the more you practice, the more you think about it, the more likely you are. For me, I'm on a ground floor unit. Statistically, house fires and disasters often happen in the middle of the night. So I wanted to be able to evacuate from my bedroom. I've been trying to train my cats. It's not the training part, it's that I live alone and trying to get them all, around the house in one area, to come to the bedroom for treats when the fire alarm goes off. Kind of like Pavlov's dogs, okay? So it's a thought, it's an idea. So I brought all the cats into the bedroom. At that point I had 3. I had pillowcases at hand, and I put 2 smaller ones in one. I put a third in the bigger one on another one. I zip tied both of them shut, pushed the screen out the window, crawled out it. I ran around to the front of the house yelling, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Got in the front door, cut the ties and let them out. It's like, I'm sorry. That's not ideal in any sense. Last time I told this, somebody got really mad at me for putting 2 cats together. That or leave them alone in a burning house, right? I was practicing practicality here. It's not ideal, it worked. So think about those things. Whatever kind of animal, whatever size you have, maybe you're on an upper story unit. Do you have an escape ladder? If the animal's not too heavy or too large, could you put them in a carrier and clip the carrier to you and crawl down the ladder? Think about what might work in your situation. Okay?
Joe, we have just a few minutes left.
And so I'm going to call that good. We almost got through our game board. I just stopped whenever we went out of time, so perfect. Thank you. Do I need to ask who has the most candies? Aha, all right. She's like, I do. I have a prize for you when we're done. Again, we've just got a couple minutes, and I'll be at the booth. I'll be at a booth out there. Lots of good information from all our community partners, so I hope you'll come visit with us. Grab some more handouts on your way out, and have a great day. Enjoy the event.
Thank you, Joe. Let's thank her.
To me, it's important that all of the agencies, not only countywide, but statewide, be involved and engaged in this to help every citizen, every business, to be able to withstand this type of event. For starters, the most important thing is taking care of yourself and your family, and then from there you're able to help your neighbors, which will also be able to help you. And with that, the neighborhoods will be able to keep themselves in a position to be able to keep everyone safer, help where help is needed.
Rural areas are different than city areas because we're the last people who will have the first responders, and all the bridges near us will all be gone, many of them, and so our community really has to stick together, and luckily many people are resilient in the rural areas, and we grow food and we know how to survive, but it's really important that we know how to get together and help each other.
Besides the individuals being able to help themselves, all the infrastructure, sewage, water, electricity, bridges, businesses, all of those things need to be able to stay intact enough so that they can get back to business, people can move goods and bring in supplies where it's needed. So that takes more than just individuals from our various CPOs or from local cities. Government, state as well as federal, need to be engaged and involved in this to assist us in achieving a means that we can be resilient and get back to normalcy as quickly as possible.